Today, we would like to begin Dogen's International Mother Language Poetry Cafe. Today, we would like to run it in English with a guest from Tranås, a small Swedish town. He is an Irish-Swedish poet, translator, and literary curator for very many literary events and festivals, internationally and nationally in Sweden. My first question is to our friend Colm Kiernan. Is the correct spelling of your name?
Yeah, it's. I usually give points to people when they try to pronounce my name because it's very awkward, especially in the Swedish tongue. Yeah, it's Colm Kiernan. So if you think of
Kiernan.
Yeah, if you think of
Kiernan.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you think of Banan.
Yeah.
Kiernan.
Yeah. Colm Kiernan are a very well known, and his familiarity is growing every day because of his involvement with very many literary events and festivals and projects, and he's a practical idol for the concept of internationalization literature between Europe and Asia, Europe and Latin America, Europe and Africa, and all continents in the world. And he has a network with different publishers, networks, literary actors, translators, poets, and even in the other form of arts, dance, paintings, and theater, and all sorts of possible art. And he is experimenting with the ideas, and it's not only just as an idea, he is also offering platform and building networks. I'm curious to know how could you dream to make a Swedish small town Tranås is a kind of center of world living culture?
It was very easy in a sense because my hometown, which is a very, very small town in Ireland, has a population of 25,000 people, and the National Opera House is there. It's not in any, it's the 10th largest town in Ireland, but still the National Opera House is in that town. And it was because a group of people gathered together, postmen, doctors and stuff, and they started to do study circles on opera. And then they decided to start actually doing opera, and this was in the 50s. So, and it has always maintained this amateur perspective. At the same time, the actual quality of the opera, the participants in the opera as opposed to the organizers, were highly professional, international people. So I experienced this thing that a small place can achieve big things. And it was a matter of trying to make the right networks and the right potentials. And so the idea was basically to, not to copy it, but to start small and see how large one could get. And at the moment, for example, we've had over 130 people visiting Tranås from all over the world, from approximately 35 different countries. And they have been from academics to activists, freestylsförfattare, you know, all art forms. And the idea is basically that, I mean, Greta Garbo came from, well, her herself didn't, but her parents and her grandparents came from Tranås and the general area. And the idea was that if someone as big as that can come from here, you don't know who the next person is that's going to make a cultural impression. And you don't know who the next person is that comes through here that will be making a cultural impression. So we had this idea of between somewhere and nowhere, and any place can be that place, but that one would connect the local with the global in many respects. If you dig where you stand, sort of a deep topography thinking, and have a critical heritage perspective on what you're doing, it doesn't matter if it's writing or what it is, you can achieve wonderful things. And in relation to writing, it's one of our major parts of our organization. We created a sister or daughter organization called Literary Center Crew. And that was in response to your invitation, Anna Sur, to work with literature on a more professional basis, not just run residencies. And we've been, since 2015, working constantly and building up international relations and working with literature and trying to encourage people to understand that an inner voice can be expressed wonderfully through literature, and to get them to experience that through flash fiction, sex word novels, poetry writing, on the practical side, and experiencing these things through festival and through events. For example, now in the middle of the pandemic that we have, every second Monday, together with Write for Word from Wales, I know you interviewed Dominic Williams not so long ago, we run a Poems and Pints Pilsner Poesy, which has people coming in from all over the world, and it gives them the opportunity as amateurs and professionals, and some of them academics, to create a sense of community. And I think that's an awful lot of what we want to achieve.
Thank you, Colm Kiernan. You're also a poet, and why and how did you write? Why and how did you begin to write poetry?
I had a very loving but very Victorian sort of society person, I don't know what the word is, mother who was a teacher. And when I entered secondary school, it grew into this thing that, but in the last years of secondary school, that it was very important that I do nothing but study and achieve my exams, which I wasn't very appreciative of. So I was left in a room full of books, and I read an awful lot other than the things I was meant to read. And I was inspired to try to express myself. As all teenagers, one has questions, one has feelings, one has many things that one wants to express. And that's where it started from. Teenage angst and an overabundance of time forced upon me to evaluate myself.
And you also translate poetry from Swedish to English?
Yeah, I've translated Frank Bergstein, who is he's published 4 books at this stage, which are comic books, but the humor in them is very skewed, very awkward, very special. So myself and Magnus Green from Magnus Green Förlag have traveled to Wales and translated his very Swedish humor into very Welsh humor. I myself, of course, am from Ireland, but it's just a matter of picking up on some of the local aspects when one is there. Then I've also translated Joachim Becker, a poet from Tronos, translated one of his books that Dominic Williams then published in English. So they're my 2 main translations at the moment. I've also translated Byrne Porter, an American poet, and that'll be coming out maybe in the autumn now.
Good luck. And would you like to tell us what are the differences between the Irish literature and English literature, since we study both of them in English and the same language for us? But as an Irish, how do you define or do you find the difference between English and Irish?
I don't want to say what English poetry is. The difference, the thing about Irish poetry would be, and I experienced this growing up very much so, because I had many teachers who were both historians and storytellers, and the oral tradition is very strong in Ireland, and the sense of spirit, the sense of longing prevail very strongly in much of the poetry. And I even hear it now when we invite to Sweden Irish poets. They still have a sense of spirituality, a sense of panentheism in their writing, irrelevant of whether they're Christian or not, because it's embedded in the psyche of Irish people. This is something that I don't experience. You might experience it a little bit in Scotland or Wales, but you wouldn't experience it, for example, in England. And I think this Celtic or this long-rooted ancestral spoken word sense within the written word. That would be how I would describe the difference.
In Uppsala, we have a concept and mission to make a common platform for both professional and amateur writers. When you do the same thing, what is your goal and what are you going to achieve?
Our main goal is to. I come from an oral tradition, shall we say. I don't have the deep respect for books. I have deep respect for words, and I can appreciate, for example, Eminem and the intricate lyric in his poetry as much as I can appreciate a sonnet from Shakespeare. And I think the threshold into literature has been raised by the education systems of Europe to a level where there is a deep disappreciation of or understanding of the capacity to find one's inner voice, one's subjective capacity to interpret the society one lives in, which I think are two of the most important things for creating a democratic person and a person who's self-thinking. And for me, demystifying the writer, demystifying the writing process, humanizing these things and humanizing the experience of them is very important. And that is what we strive for. So we don't strive for the best, we strive for the most inspiring, the most engaging writers, because we want people to feel something. And therefore for us, it's very interesting. When you go to the Fringe Festival, for example, that we usually hold in July, but this year we'll be holding in October, mostly digitally. You're sitting in a cafe. You're not sitting in an auditorium. You're sitting in a pub, in a lounge, in a hotel, a small theater of 50-seater theater or something. And the idea is that you're sitting beside an international writer. There's no green room. There's no special space for special writers, for special people. The idea is that everyone has the democratic right to take the stage, and so this is what we try to work with all the time. When we're working with teenagers, or we're working with pensioners, or whatever it is.
I'd like to tell you something. Once the Indian Prime Minister, his name was Vishwanath Pratap Singh, he was a poet also. And showing the big map of India, he told the audience that a country survives not in the map, but in the minds of the millions of people. And I was in Thronos and in 2014, and it was the Dylan Thomas Writers in Residency. You were the host. And all the participants were interviewed by Irish radio. Then I told them, I will present you as I told you, as the king of culture in Thronos, and I meant it. And how would you find your position in the human minds, and is a respectful position? How would you find it? How would you feel it?
That's a very hard question to answer. I don't really have a good answer to that one, I'm afraid. I think in many respects, coming out of the normal, not necessarily into the abnormal or into the weird, but I think if we're all able to understand that we can be someone else, that we can just go beyond ourselves a little bit, impress ourselves by achieving something else, we can all be kings of culture, and we can all be that voice, that expression of the society we live in. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's...
Both you and I have similar pains and pleasures living in a second country or sharing times with different countries. And it's like a traveler's life. And painful or thankless job is to be an editor and host,
Mhm.
but you are long time so respected and loved by you. So very hard to find any alternative or opposite. And how could it be? So even we cannot be ourselves.
Um, I think I'm better as a host than I am as a performer or as a reader or as a poet. My poetry was never written originally for consumption, and uh, I have always loved being in the background and manipulating the situation. And I think that mindset, in many respects, suits me as in character, where I can be cold and distant and detached, even though it's probably the one thing about me that I hate the most. But I probably trained myself too well to be that person, so that when I actually write then or read my poetry, it's often overwhelmingly emotional for me, because I'm actually tapping into who I am, the person I've hidden and the person I've lied to everyone about.
And what are you writing now?
At the moment, I've just finished a poem about Trumpyism or Trump. I've done 3 poems about Trump, and the idea is to do a 4th. And I started during the election campaigns, and I'm trying to capture the emotion of, in word, of what he's doing to us psychologically.
And
So that's where I am at the moment, and the next piece is probably going to be a piece on what I do to myself psychologically to torture myself.
and what is your next project or idea for your curatorial position?
For my
From your curatorial position of curator?
uh, um, well, at the moment we're preparing for the Fringe Festival, so we're curating that, and we've got a project based on we have an archive of letters from the 80s and 90s, which is a cultural expression through a specific art form, punk letters. And it's letters from 35 different countries of people of the same age, from the same experiences, trying to talk. So it's like from Russia and America and Brazil and Japan and all over Europe and everywhere. And we're trying to, through different art forms, through writing and through art, to capture the message, the feeling of that, because it's a people's conversation on an international level, and I think it's a very valuable one, because when one reads history books, one reads the crescendos, the big events, the big catastrophes, the big happenings. To actually get people to produce something based on the small events, the small happenings, the ordinary people having their ordinary conversation, from a cultural perspective, I think is very valuable, and lends very much so to helping us to understand our subjective, because I think the subjective is the most important aspect of having a voice, to have our own voice and not to have the same voice as everyone else around us.
And I know it is not easy to get your voice heard, making you living in a second land. But how could it be for you?
I've got 3 children. I've lived here since I was 22 years of age. I came here just to be here for 1 or 2 years, and life happened. I noticed, I think somewhere in 2008 with the economic crisis, I was involved in politics, and someone asked me, back in your place, back in home, how are things? And I said, they have it bad. And I realized that I had assimilated into the Swedish society to the degree that I could not associate with the situation in Ireland. It's like the situation where I don't have a vote in Ireland. And I think that's only right, because I do not have an understanding of that country that is my country. My understanding is old. My understanding is dated. I cannot feel what the teenagers and young people of Ireland need or want as a 51-year-old man. I can't vote as a part of that society. And I think in a sense, I understood that irrelevant of how proud culturally or any other thing that I might be of Ireland, that as many Irish people become American citizens or anything else, I'm now a Swedish citizen, and I live by the Swedish way of thinking. I had a very interesting experience. I go over to Ireland now and again to festivals and things, and I was at a festival. I met a guy from Nässjö, and he was talking about his experience of going to Sweden, and my experience going to Ireland is the exact opposite. And that was that when he comes to Sweden, after 5 or 6 days, he feels constrained by the rules and regulations. He thinks everything's a pain in the ass, and he just wants to go home to Ireland. Well, when I'm in Ireland, I feel that everyone's just bitching and nothing works, and it's starting to get to me, and I just want to go back to Sweden. That's not to say that I don't feel, I mean, and if you could marry these two different characters of a Irish society, which is very social and chaotic, and in relation to, and the Swedish society is very organized and fantastically structured. You can flow through things quickly, knowing how they work. If you could marry those two, you'd have the perfect society, but they're actually polar opposites, so they push each other away. So I guess I am somewhere in between there, appreciating both equally as an Irish Swedish citizen, but probably I probably wouldn't survive Ireland. I don't think it would take an awful lot of adaptation at this stage after 30 years.
So let me tell you something. Once I was in a dialogue with Dagens Nyheter's former chief editor, Arun Ruth, and he asked me how to find the difference between Swedish and Bengali literary culture. Then I told him, say, Sweden has the institutional block, and Bangladesh has the institutional leg. Then, a couple of days before, one of my editors from Dhaka, also a writer, his name is Tanmoy Imran, he asked me, whose country is similar to Bangladesh, which European country? Then I told, I have not been in that country. It's my imagination feeling. Ireland could be the most closer to the culture and the society of Bangladesh. And Scandinavia will be the total opposite of Bengali society. That I have not been in Ireland, and you are not in Bangladesh. But when I find you in your works and writings, I love to find even Irish voice and Irish individual. But next step should be, you will be in Bangladesh, we will invite you to Bangladesh, and I must take the initiative to be in Ireland to cross-check.
Yeah, that would be cool.
At this stage, would you like to read some of your poems?
Yeah, well, I'm starting to. I'm a friend of mine, Frank Bergstein, and myself are working on translating many of my poems, but I don't dare read them. I don't think they're finished yet. I'll read a poem from when I was 15 to start with, just where I started with my poetry. Peace at last. I wish to be buried in a plain wooden box with a plain woolen cloth under a plain wooden cross, by the wee murky river that flows as if below the sea, near that crock old house and the large devil's tree, down some old gravel lane with the big iron gates, in the middle of a field where the graves are old and all lie and wait. Since I mentioned the Trump one, I guess I should throw that into the mix. See how this sounds. Narrative number 2. Gibberish, weaponized nonsensity, obnoxification of society, ratification of cagedness, realization of stupidity, recognition of affirmation bias, nausea at repugnance, aversion to its abhorrence, revulsion at the antagonism, animosity reluctance to truth. And traveling abroad we find exciting, and it can be life-changing, enjoying that freedom. And traveling abroad we find exciting, and it can be life-changing, enjoying that freedom. Speak fluent moron, crisp without even a sludder. Then lean into the suck, as there is a virtue in broadcasting your amorality at the highest known volume of stupidity, trust-busting reality of lies. And we enjoy new language, and they give us hope. And we enjoy new language, and they give us hope. Untethered to truth, thoughts, prayers, and cynical gestures in pioneering of nauseating invention, testimony, and facadism, mythic past warped by liberal, feminist, or immigrant, conjuring truths against faith and adjacent realities, decorum trumped constantly by derision, Bannon-esque division. And my friends are with me, and it's going to be a good day. And my friends are with me, and it's going to be a good day. Fetishist Twitter fingers trust busting realities of lies. I believe him. Truth isn't truth, but when I can, I tell the truth. He means it. Make hate again. With truths that burned witches, make fake again by self-proclamation testification down the slinker hole, otherings untethered to truth. And we shall have fun, and the future is bright. And we shall have fun, and the future is bright. So that's the Trump one. I don't really know what else to. I don't know if I should go with funny or if I should go serious, or I'll do one from Istanbul. I do love to write poetry in a place at the time, capturing that moment. And this is one that a few of my friends like a lot, so I guess it's okay. It's called Cellar in Kadıköy. Hands up and wave, music for a cellar of youth, a room filled with Kurdish music, a cellar in Istanbul, smoke filled with tobaccos and hormones, performances more than on stage, group videos to die for, another cig, singing along, posts to read, hands in the air, videos to make, music, stuffed text, clicks to read, time with poetry, relaxed in the excitement of the constant speed, skeets all round, lovers kissing, listening to good music, chargers fueling enthusiasm, excitement, lust and desire, cables making meaning that mirror purpose and beautiful feeling. Girls with tights or hijabs and boots or low-cut tops, boys in Levi's shirts, slick cute-cut hair, tight jeans. This one's got us all gleeing, beer bottles waving, shouts, claps, whistles, heavy chords singing. With smiles, tears, voices and body, it's all got meaning. A fella sits by the door, twiddling a poem. A cat saunters towards the stage as we're all leaving. I don't know, should I read more or?
Yeah, we have some more times. If you would like, would be happy.
Okay. I guess I could do. This is one I wrote. Actually, there's a story behind this, which I probably should tell. I can tell it because it's been told by others. A friend of mine, a very dear friend, contacted me and was suffering from anxiety, and I was sort of jokingly saying some things to her as to how she could jokingly, relieve her anxiety. And I wrote a poem then, immediately afterwards, as a response to that experience. And it was meant to be as a pick-me-up joke. And the next morning, I just got up and in a weird voice, I recorded the recording and I sent it to Dominic Williams, and he was feeling very bad. He'd been out all night, sitting by the sea, wondering what to do with himself. And when he came home, he felt that this was sort of like this weird thing, that this poem turned up because it was exactly how he felt and what he needed to do. And so, Vrol. But if you're going for a walk, why do it alone? Why not share it with a cow? If you do it right, you might get a friendly face licking. What more could you want? Go up to a cow, grab her by her ears and let rip into her face with the most bitching banshee guttural roll. Your bloodying lungs can push through your strained throat, with eyes popping to tears, to tippy toes as your muscles tense up and hair falls across your face. Release. Cow screaming can relieve stress, add excitement to a boring country walk, bring relief to muscular tensions, stimulate blood circulation, cure loneliness, an athlete's foot, gallstones, obnoxious tendencies, baldness, menstrual bleeding, and tensions. Training before cow screaming can help to avoid unexpected stampeding, cow kicking and headbutting, heart attacks, blood clots and strokes. Talk to your doctor first. Note, there is research that suggests evidence that the recipient might not appreciate cow screaming as much as you, but this has not been confirmed. There's a humor to that, but actually it is very much so a story about anxiety and our needs to deal with it, because we live in a very anxious time. Another way of dealing with anxiety, I do write a little bit, not much, but a little bit about mental health issues, because like everyone, one's experienced some form of problem with mental health, I think. Maybe I'm just unusual. In terms of depression and things like that, or anxiety. So this is a very simple, from title to end, it's just a litany of questions. And what can bestow and divvy the day? Can I ask you there, how does your day start? Maybe it starts with a fart. What do you do the minute you get up? You might even do it with a sup. What do you need to get in your prime? How do you feel sublime? I mean to ask you, how do you measure time? How do you celebrate stuff? You might even do it in the buff. How do you appraise your happenings? Do you know how to feed your imaginings, like gaps the frequents? How do you honor your achievements, or feel fully your grievance? Do you know how to get a flutter in the head, or is it something you do just before bed? And how do you blow off steam? No, how do you reward cream? How do you immortalize, ritualize? Tell me how you memorialize. I want to know how you socialize. Can you tell me how you reproach, deny, humiliate, condemn, debase, castigate? What do you do after you consecrate? And can it bestow and divvy the day? Hey, how do you get your mellow? Do you use tobacco? I can't say that I actually tried to get a wide spectrum of my poetry, because I just realized that I only had one poem, which was geography based. I tend to write a lot of poetry in place, as I said, and an awful lot of it is describing the place. Do you want another one, or is that enough?
Please
so
run some more minutes, 5 minutes.
Okay, well, this one will bring us sort of close to the end. This one I wrote in Ferryside in Wales when I was there on residency, and it's the morning after a storm, basically. Aftermath. I see the river flowing higher than the road, beside the way to the square, bellowing through the hedgerows, a cow. The deep gurgle and babble of water through the drains, in one and out another. An owl fella, stick in hand, marches in protest, in flowing water along the road, through the car park, cars in rivers. Slipping on mucky footpaths, like at home on the ice. Using a stream, crossing the road to wash my shoes, a woman apologizes for the mess. Bubble up water flows from the manhole through the railroad crossing as I head down to read a sign. The ferry's running, and there's a wasp annoying me. The storm is over and there's no smell. Wading through small rocks, porous stones and debris, some raised to the grass banks above. Waves crashing on the breaks to children's cheers. Here with such high tide, the water heavy with silt, slow and brutal in its march against the shore. It would bury you with its flow. No walk on this beach, I'll go the road. The trees combed northeast by the years of wind, I can still hear the thunderous rhythm of the sea. Solar panels take the day off. Another diesel train spins by as I make it down the village road where I shall stay. So.
Thank you, Colm.